This conference is no longer being recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Mayor French, since I was here in Town Hall, I was going to go sit up in your seat in council chambers.
Oh, that'd be fine.
I'm kind of envious. I'd like us to get back here sooner or later.
I think we're all getting anxious.
Yeah.
This meeting is now called to order. I'd like to welcome everyone. And for roll call, everyone is present. And we'll now take a moment for reflection and respect, please. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda, please.
That council adopts the agenda for the meeting of July 12th, 2021 as presented.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Councillor Charlton. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. There are no delegations and public meetings this evening. Adoption of council and committee minutes.
That council approves the following minutes. Regular virtual meeting of council held on June 21st, 2021.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Oslach. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And it's carried. Thank you. The next item up is the consent agenda.
That item 7.1 to 7.20 of the July 12th, 2021 consent agenda be adopted as presented with actions to be taken as noted.
Okay, someone to move it and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Charlton. Are there any questions or concerns with the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We'll move right into action items. The first report is REC 0321.
That report REC 0321 entitled Contract Award EECC Ductwork Insulation be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions or concerns? Councillor Barber. I think you're on mute, Councillor Barber.
Yep, sorry about that. Hopefully don't do it again. Anyway, as far as the original construction of the complex, over time we've encountered several different issues where more stringent oversight in the design process could have saved us a lot of headache and money over time. Do we have any kind of grasp as to where the system fell a little bit short? We're talking about the ductwork and sweating at this particular time. We've talked previously about the boards having to be redesigned and altered. We talked about the dressing rooms not being insulated, being a warm space in a cold environment. And you would have thought that these things would have been picked up. Do we have any kind of assurance as we move forward that we're going to be able to catch those things that are costly in the long run?
Okay, thank you for your question, Councillor Barber. Andy, did you want to answer his question, or is Tom present? I'm not sure if he's here this evening.
No, Tom's not on the call. I know Rob jumped on, but yeah, so at a high level, I know this one was, again, to relate to the hot and cold area there, the condensation was causing the issue between those two zones. Certainly, yeah, I think whenever you're doing a capital project, you have to look at these things and do detailed design. I don't know a lot of the previous history on it, but we can have a discussion and go back and talk with Tom and provide some more details to council if that assists.
Does that help, Councillor Barber?
Yes, it does, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Oslach.
Yes, Your Worship. Now that the complex is approaching over 20 years old, we expect these little things to break down. And I think in the past we had a leaky roof and that, and the parking lot pavement was not done properly. But I expect over time we'll be expecting more repairs, because the complex is complex was built in 2002, I believe. So it's 20 years old. So we can expect the repairs to be increasing over the years.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Councillor Charlton.
Through Your Worship, I was surprised at the spread in the two estimates for repair. I was wondering, are we comparing apples to apples?
Andy, would you like to answer that question, please?
Yeah, through you, Mayor French. Yeah, I believe we are. The difference, I think, may have something to do just with simply demand for services right now. That one bidder might have had a lot more work to do and may not have been as interested in the project, but it's fairly accurate in terms of the estimate. As you recall, in the budget, there was $8,000 for this project. So it will hopefully come in right around that amount.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions or concerns? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report up is OPNS 1421.
That report, OPNS 1421, entitled Contract Award Elk Street Reconstruction Engineering Service, be received for information, and that council award the Elk Street Reconstruction Consulting Contract to WT Infrastructure of Guelph, Ontario, pending receipt of satisfactory proof of insurance and WSIB clearance certificates, and further that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the agreement with WT Infrastructure following the terms and conditions in the RFP documents and the June 29th, 2021 proposal submission.
Okay, thank you. Someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Ham. Rob's here. Would you care to give us an overview of this report, please, Rob?
Certainly, Your Worship. We issued an RFP for consulting services for next year's capital project. It was an RFP based on the best value for the town. So all of the consultants that submitted had to make the minimum criteria for technical services. We wanted to be able to make sure that they could actually do the project before we looked at the bid. So all three submissions that we received were further evaluated on their financial merit. And pleased to say that I think that this company, WT Infrastructure, was awarded the most points throughout the whole process, and they were the lowest priced alternative as well. So we did really well. This reminds me of almost the second time where we had the highest score with the lowest price when we did the generator as well. So I think our procurement is working well for us.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any questions or comments from council? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. Two quick things. First of all, it's nice to see engineering come in under budget. And secondly, is the Elk Street project, does it have any effect to separate groundwater from the sanitaries? Is that part of this project?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Barber, no, I don't believe that's part of this project. And I would mention too that the engineering is under budget, but there are some unknowns when you're this early into the engineering. For example, if we have to do a permit to take water, because once we do the boreholes, there's groundwater in the area. There's some other geotechnical work that has to be done. All of that is sort of on top of this price as well. But we work to control those prices.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Charlton.
Through your worship, what's the total budget for the Elk Street reconstruction? Is there a ballpark figure for the whole thing?
Through you, Your Worship, I believe the reconstruction itself or the engineering?
The whole deal.
I believe it's probably around a $3 to $4 million project, again, depending on the scope of the final project. And we're so early in the engineering, we don't have any drawings done yet. We can't do a really formal estimate, but sort of an asset management estimate, if you will, would be between 3 and 4 million for that road.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Oslach.
Yes, Your Worship. To Rob, Elk Street now is storm sewer and sanitation. Are they combined or at present?
Through you, Your Worship, no, they're not.
Okay, so they're separate.
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. The next report is Plan 0221.
That report, Plan 0221, entitled Application for Consent, easement number 4821, 62 Oak Street, be received for information. And that the application for consent, number 4821, relating to property located at lots 27 and 28, Plan 145, and known municipally as 62 Oak Street, be supported for reasons set out in the report. And further, that this report be forwarded to the Land Division Committee for its review and consideration.
Okay, thank you. Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Councillor Ham. Christy, I don't see you there, but I think you're online. Did you want to give us an overview of this report?
Certainly, Your Worship. So the application for consent before you this evening is for permission to establish an easement. This application is scheduled to be heard at the July 28th meeting of Land Division Committee. The application applies to only a portion of the lands located at 62 Oak Street, and it will it's an irregularly shaped utility easement that will run along the easterly property line. There's currently an existing underground power line The easement would confer right to use this portion of land for access to the utility, as well as utility maintenance. So this application is fairly technical in nature. I'm satisfied that it's in alignment with applicable policies and regulations, and therefore the recommendation before council is to offer support for the application, and that the resolution be forwarded to Land Division Committee. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Are there any questions or comments for Christy? Councillor Chapman.
Sorry, I had to get the right mouse. Can you just explain to me this easement? What does that mean?
Through you, your worship. An easement is essentially a portion of land that's identified on a reference plan. So they will register this a part of land and be able to attach an agreement onto it. So it will remain part of the current lot. It's just that there'll be a little chunk basically delineated, so or outlined, where a certain agreement will be registered to that particular portion of land. And that will be to the benefit of the utility company. It will just allow access. There may be some limitations as to what can be built over the easement, and that's really to protect the infrastructure that's underneath the ground.
And that's what I wanted to understand, is that the easement is for the utility company. That's what I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on that. Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Christy. All those in favor? And that's carried. The next item up is report plan 0321.
That report, Plan 0321, entitled Applications for Zoning Bylaw Amendment, ZBA 0121, and Site Plan Control 0121, regarding 33 South Street East be received for information, and that the applications for Zoning Bylaw Amendment 0121 and Site Plan Control 0121 relating to the property located known municipally, or sorry, the property known municipally as 33 South Street East be supported for reasons set out in the report. And that council consider waiving the rules of order to proceed with 3 readings of the implementing bylaw for zoning bylaw amendment 0121. And further, that upon expiry of the appeal period for the passing of the zoning bylaw amendment 0121, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the development agreement as outlined in bylaw and pertaining to application for site plan control 0121.
Thank you. Someone to move and someone to second, please. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Charlton. Christy, would you mind again just giving a bit of an overview of this report, please?
Certainly, your worships. Through you, you have before you this evening a combined report for a zoning bylaw amendment and an application for site plan control, and these pertain to the lands at 33 South Street East. This may look familiar to many of you. You may recall that there was previous discussions relating to this property where there was recommendations to support an official plan amendment as well as a zoning bylaw amendment contingent upon an application for site plan control. So the underlying purpose of these applications is to recognize and permit a 5th dwelling unit located in the existing converted dwelling, and this dwelling unit is currently in the basement. So in August of 2020, the application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment came forward to council. A public meeting was held, and at the time there was no delegations or verbal comments recorded. So when I came on board, I undertook an extensive review of this development property, as well as the building permit issuance is to date. I concluded that 33 South Street East met the criteria of a non-conforming use as described in section 6.4 of the Town of Elmer's official plan. So based on the policy direction contained within this portion of the official plan, it was deemed that an official plan amendment is actually not required to facilitate the development. So I proceeded to evaluate the application for zoning bylaw amendment as well as site plan control. These applications were reviewed against the provincial policy statement, the county official plan, the town's official plan, and the zoning bylaw. Of particular note for this application is the evaluation criteria for applications for enlargement or extensions of non-conforming uses, which is found in section 6.4.1 of the town's official plan. And I've outlined this criteria in the report. The intent of the criteria is to ensure that the wider interests of the general public are considered within the review process. And these matters are typically addressed through site plan control, which has been applied to this property. So based on my review for the zoning bylaw amendment, I'm satisfied that the requirements of the Planning Act are being fulfilled. It's consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the official plans of both the town and the county, and it represents sound land use planning. I'm recommending that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment and waive 3 readings, or waive procedure to proceed with 3 readings of the attached bylaw. In addition, there's the site plan control application. Through review, I am satisfied that it represents sound engineering and good land use planning. Again, recommending that council approve, and there's a draft bylaw and development agreement appended to tonight's council agenda for endorsement, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Christy. Councillor Chapman.
Is this the same property that I remember that one of the issues was parking?
If I may, Your Worship?
Yes, go ahead, Christy.
Yes, so through the site plan control process, that is essentially what the intent was, to ensure that there was sufficient parking and that it was adequately arranged on site. We also took a look at the drainage of the property to ensure that it wouldn't have any negative impacts on surrounding properties. So there was a detailed engineering plan provided, and it's appended again to the reports this evening. And we've had a peer review completed, and we're satisfied that both the parking arrangement and the resulting grading and runoff is satisfactory.
Did you have a follow-up question, Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm sorry, I didn't find the part for the parking, because one of the issues was that it's across from the school, and the original plan, they would have to back onto the street, and that was a concern. So is that still a concern, that the one parking spot would be have to back onto the street?
If I may.
Go ahead, Christy.
So all the parking that is located on site, located behind the building, there is a sufficient turnaround so that they can exit the driveway located along the easterly property line. There was previously 2 driveways proposed, or 2 driveways existing. The second driveway, per the plans, has been removed. So all parking is to be located at the rear of the property now.
Okay, that was my concern. Thank you.
Councillor Oshach.
Yes, Your Worship. This property seems to come to council every few years. I can remember in previous council sessions, it came to our council several times over the years. Is this possible that this ends the whole situation?
Christy, do you have an answer for Councillor Oshach?
Kind of. So the intent of the zoning bylaw amendment is to limit the number of units to 5. So the density is already quite high on this lot. It's only about 0.1 of a hectare, or an acre, sorry. So it would be challenging to further increase the number of units. So we're hopeful that 5 is the maximum. It has been a long time coming, and it's been to council, I would say, a number of times. It's also been working with administration for quite a while. We're hoping that the decision this evening will resolve all outstanding issues, and that the 5 units will be in compliance and conformity with a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Christy. I believe you can end this process now.
Councillor Charlton.
Through your worship. So it was 2 conforming units, and then they expanded it to 4. So there's 2 conforming and 2 non-conforming. And now we're expanding it to 4 conforming. And so there's like 1 not conforming, or are they all conforming? And my concern is that, is it going to open the floodgates up for other renovations that are currently 2, and they're going to go to 3 or 4?
So if I may, the bylaw amendment in front of you this evening will basically legalize and permit all 5 units. If the Hokies would like to increase beyond that, they will have to come back to administration for a building permit. And at that time, we would, advise them that the limits of the permitted uses is 5 units. With respect to seeing it elsewhere within the town, we are seeing a number of inquiries for converted dwellings, duplexes, semi-detached dwellings. Based on the policy direction within the 5-year review official plan amendment, this is the type of development that could be encouraged. What triggers our review is at the time of building permit. When they come in, the CBO will review against applicable law, being the zoning bylaw and the permitted uses, and that's when we typically flag whether or not we can permit those additional uses or if a zoning bylaw amendment is required. As they add more units, we're likely to see more applications for site plan control. Typically, there's an exemption for a single or duplex, but once you get into 3, 4, or 5 units, which isn't very typical, I would say typically it's 1 to 3, we would see those come before council.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? So just for clarification, so the provincial policy statement, if I'm not mistaken, Christy, actually the provincial governments, so if the floodgates are opening, it is because the province is kind of advocating for this, right? Because there's such a shortage in rental properties and those types of things, and we've got people on the streets and we need affordable housing and other types of housing. I think Councillor Charlton, if I'm not mistaken, I've been paying attention to this quite closely, especially through the county. We're going to be seeing a lot more of this because they're allowing it. Am I correct about that, Christy?
Through you, Your Worship, absolutely. The province is encouraging a range of housing types and densities. So particularly within our new official plan amended official plan is consideration for accessory dwelling units. So that's where you have a unit above the garage or a smaller granny suite in the house. So I do anticipate that once we have that implementing zoning bylaw amendment in place, that we will be seeing this more frequently. And as you mentioned, Your Worship, this is positive. I would say it does fill a need within the community for smaller units, so people can either age in place or just hit that affordable market.
Okay, thank you, Christy. If there are no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is Clerk 2921.
That report, Clerk 2021, entitled Procedure Bylaw Up, be received for information, and that Council approves recommendations for amendment as outlined in the report, Clerk 2921, and further that Council directs staff to give notice of intent to amend the Procedure Bylaw in accordance with the town notice policy, and that Council directs staff to prepare a Procedure Bylaw amendment for consideration at the August 9th, 2021 regular virtual meeting of Council.
Okay, thank you. Someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Oslach. I guess I'll turn this over to you, Josh, if you don't mind, if you would like to give a bit more information to Council about this report.
Certainly, through you, Your Worship, staff have prepared a Procedure Bylaw informational report at this point, just to get guide development of a Procedure Bylaw amendment to come at a future meeting of Council on August 9th, 2021. The 3 items that have been highlighted in this informational report have to do with the Council meeting date of the week, the bylaw reading protocol, and the management of the consent agenda. And really the overarching themes on some of these suggested amendments are to streamline processes at Town Hall, to sort of alleviate administrative burden, and also it's good to review the Procedure Bylaw from time to time to ensure that our practices are aligned with neighboring communities. For this report, just in terms of sort of format of delivery, staff intend to provide an overview of each suggested change, sort of to solicit Council feedback one item at a time, with the outcome of the report ultimately providing direction to staff for the subsequent amendment. So I'll start with the first recommendation, The first recommendation set out in this report has to do with amending the regular meeting day from Monday to Wednesday, with the balance of that section, so being 5.3, remaining in effect. The rationale for this amendment at a high level has to do with eliminating inconsistency in the council schedule, allowing for additional time for the public and council to review meeting materials, and it also resolves some logistical challenges with the anticipated migration to a compressed work week. So at this point, I'll just provide a little bit more in-depth information for each of those points. So as far as the inconsistency in the council schedule goes, at present time, section 5.3A of the procedure bylaw stipulates that when a regular meeting of council is scheduled, would fall on a statutory holiday, it's deferred to the next Monday of that week. And what that leads to is at least 3 back-to-back meeting weeks each calendar year, and as a result of those public and civic holiday disruptions. So some of the reasons that back-to-back meeting dates are problematic, and the reason that we've brought this up partially is because they do result in irregular intervals between council meetings, which can sometimes be impactful with respect to time-sensitive and legislative matters, such as public planning meetings. When our meetings are bunched up, what that leads to is a larger amount of time in between meetings, and it also leads to staff and council calling special council meetings, which can be administratively burdensome and do consume additional corporate resources and present additional costs to the town. In addition, the back-to-back council meetings have been administratively burdensome for staff from the perspective that, when staff conclude, sorry, I just missed my point here. There's a reduced time frame between those back-to-back meeting dates, and that's led to historically smaller agendas on the second meeting and shorter meetings for the second meeting of each sequence. And ultimately, the administrative resources that are put into producing an agenda, developing the minutes, the public notice circulations in advance, those are the same for every meeting, sort of whether there's many items on the agenda or just a few. So really it's staff's intent to have meetings at a more regular interval, with fewer back-to-back instances where we're pushed in that respect. In terms of additional public notice and a review of council materials, this is something that we've heard from both members of council and the community, where at times when legislative services are publishing an agenda on a Thursday early in the afternoon, it can be challenging if folks are working over the weekend, or if they're busy on a weekend, to have fully read all of the council materials and be prepared for a meeting on Monday evening. So really at this point, we're anticipating that if council's agreeable to this type of change, the section 6.3, which sets out notice requirements for publishing of the agenda, would remain the same. So what that leads to is 2 extra days for the public and council to review the council meeting materials in advance of the meeting. So in this case, the agenda would still be published on Thursday before noon hour, with the regular meeting to take place on the upcoming Wednesday. Finally, this change of meeting date does resolve logistical challenges regarding the implementation of a compressed work week. As council's aware, staff intend to bring that formal work plan proposal to the August 9th meeting, which is why we're bringing this up at this point. At present, the administration staff have made it standard practice to ensure that at all times a director or the chief administrative officer are present at town hall. And one of the challenges that we do run into with a Monday council meeting is that for the most part, all directors and the chief administrative officer must attend that meeting. And not to say that this would be a deal breaker, so to speak, on a compressed work week model, but I think the point that we're trying to make is that it is a much simpler and more consistent schedule for staff if that Monday meeting date is changed to a Wednesday. So happy to answer any questions just regarding this first point in the report.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Are there any questions or comments about this? Councillor Chapman first, and then Councillor Charlton.
I have no problem with it being on Wednesdays, but in the summer months when it's at 5:30, some of us work, and to get from work to the meeting, I guess Mondays is the same. It's just, for me, I have Mondays off, so I haven't had to deal with it. But Wednesdays is a very significant day. And if the summer meetings are changed to 5:30, it would be difficult to get to the meeting on time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Charlton, I believe you're next.
Through your worship, I don't particularly agree with having the 2 extra days to prepare for the council meeting or to let the public know as far as that goes. It's kind of our job to get ready for it, whether it's, Monday and we get the agenda on Thursday. Sometimes we're busier than others, but that's just what we do. The Aylmer Express publishes on Tuesday, I believe, and that was always kind of a positive point that we could get our information out, or if we had a RFP going out or information that was more current and ready for the paper. And the compressed work week, that's supposed to be taken care of. We're supposed to, have people on Monday that can handle things as if we did not have a compressed work week. Likewise on Friday. So I have a little issue with that. And when it's written up, I hate to see that we're burdening the staff. I have a little trouble with that phrase. I don't want to burden the staff. Are they burdened? Are we short-staffed that it is a burden for them to prep for the back-to-back meeting and do their regular work? To me, we've only been caught off guard with something time sensitive, and I thought that was the town insurance, and that's because we put out an RFP for it. And so we had to have a special meeting for that. But otherwise, on the 3rd Monday, surely staff knows what's down the pipe, even if we just had a meeting on the 2nd Monday. So, and when they talk about staff requesting this or talking about it, like what staff is it? Is it different staff for different issues, or is it the same staff? Is the treasurer always involved, the CAO and director of corporate services, or who? So those are just a couple of concerns I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charlton. Councillor Oslach.
Yes, Your Worship. I think Josh's procedure bylaw, looking at it, and I think it would solve a lot of problems. The conflict of back-to-back meetings. And basically, I'm in favor of a Wednesday. I think we should go to that. It's I've been on council now 11 years, and I'm getting used to Monday nights. But I know there's a few instances that we have difficulty and a meeting on Monday nights because of the back-to-back problems, and statutory holidays come in effect that way. I think I'm in favor of moving to Wednesday.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Deputy Mayor Andrews, you're next, and then Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. I am in favor of the change. I agree with Councillor Oslach that when it's Mondays and it's a holiday, it does cause some confusion and pushes out that extra meeting date. I think it's going to be better for staff. It's going to be better for the public because they're going to have more time to review, more time to reach out and get the important information out that we need. It's us also going to staff and asking those questions. And this gives them time to come back. So I think that personally, Wednesdays, it makes much more sense to me. So I'm in favor of the change.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Andrews. Councillor Barber, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Worship. Just so council is aware, I'm working a couple of 100 kilometers away from Elmer this evening, and the internet is going in and out. It's in a relative.
Okay, we've lost you, Councillor Barber. I'll turn it to someone else if you have other questions, and we'll wait for Councillor Barber to be able to get back on. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Charlton.
I didn't hear what Deputy Mayor Andrews was saying because things were cutting out at that time as well.
Oh, sorry. If I can just rephrase what she said that she's in favor of Wednesday meetings because she believes that it would give everyone more time to do their research, such as reading their agendas and reaching out to staff for more information and those types of things. And if I've made a mistake, sorry, Deputy Mayor Andrews, you certainly can speak and say, but if he's having trouble hearing you, I'm trying to relay. It's tough when we do these kinds of meetings because sometimes we just can't hear each other. I'll say something while we're waiting for Councillor Barber. My only concern is I think we all have to reach out to the councillors here. Are any of you working on Wednesdays? This was my worry. So if it's going to cause heartache for some of our councillors, and we do have several councillors that have full-time jobs. Councillor Ham, I see Councillor Chapman put her hand up. Does that affect you, Councillor Ham? I know you're a very busy person and you're working all the time. So I'm just wondering, is a Wednesday even going to work for you, Councillor Ham? We can't hear you either. Sorry, Councillor Ham. I don't know if there's something going on with the internet or. We can't hear you either. Sorry. I'm not sure what's going on. Well, we'll turn it back over to Councillor Barber. Maybe we can get Councillor Ham back on. Councillor Barber, are you able to hear us?
I'm back at the moment. Thank you, Worship. It's going in and out regularly. I was just very quickly trying to mention that I have other interests that I do on Wednesday night, and we'll have to.
And we're not hearing you. Sorry, Councillor Barber. We just simply can't hear you. And I'm not. And this is a very important report. So, Deputy Mayor Andrews, did you have something you wanted to share?
No, I didn't. I was just saying, if worst comes to worst, you could always type it very quickly in the chat box too, and maybe that would come across.
Okay, I guess that is an option. It's just with this report, this is a very important report. This, I mean, it's going to change the whole way we do things at council with our dates and everything. And we certainly want all the input from all the councillors. So I'm not sure if staff have something they can advise if we should maybe come back to this report, maybe move on to something else, or what would you suggest, Josh?
Through your worship and two members of council, I'd be happy to present the balance of the report with the understanding that that the recommendation, or I guess the future decision, be referred to a future meeting of council. I think at this point, as you've said, there's some fairly significant decisions on the table, and we've had a great deal of discussion, and I think that there's no reason we can't finish off presenting the report at this point just for the public's information, but ultimately I think it's certainly within council's prerogative to refer the decision to another meeting date.
Okay, I appreciate that, Josh. And if, we certainly can go through this report and all of us can hear it, so we can certainly hear all the information. But I think if we're not all able to give our comments, as you have suggested, we may have to refer this to another time because we definitely want to have everyone's input. And I thank you, Councillor Ham. You did send a message saying that you could make Wednesdays work for council on your schedule. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll turn it back over to you, Josh.
Certainly, yeah. Through your worship and two members of council, just moving down the report, getting into the second recommendation right here. So the second recommendation has to do with the way that council reads bylaws. So the second recommendation is to delete section 10B of the procedure bylaw and rely solely on section 10A, which states that council is going to be provided with a draft copy of all bylaws, which are on the agenda for consideration. And further, that every bylaw shall be introduced by motion and shall receive 3 readings prior to it being passed, with nothing preventing the council from giving all 3 readings to that bylaw in the same meeting. And the rationale for this amendment that would relieve council of its obligation to suspend procedural policies before proceeding with 3 readings of a bylaw has to do with the increased use of informational reports preceding bylaws, and the practice of reading bylaws 3 times being more commonplace in comparable municipalities. I think ultimately, it's not staff or council's intent to, be streamlining this process in a way that, disallows public input or forces decisions to be made quicker than they need to be. The intent of this is ultimately to. Oh, sorry, I just got some feedback.
Computer problems as well.
Just wondering if. Okay, looks like it's resolved.
Sorry, I had to switch computers. My other one's not working properly. I apologize for that.
No problem at all. So really, I think that this report before us tonight is a prime example where staff are providing an informational report to council that outlines the bylaw amendments to come. There's discussion being had about those amendments, and ultimately, what staff are suggesting is that in circumstances where an informational report or even a public notice, say on a zoning bylaw or an official plan amendment, has already been sort of resolved in a public meeting, the idea of council reading a bylaw 3 times, whether it's to accommodate a development or to ensure that we're awarding a contract for one of our vendors, especially when it's already seen the council table, already been at the council table, is really not uncommon. And we're finding that often we are suspending the procedural policies for items that have already been at the council table. And really by considering this amendment to the procedure bylaw, it would still be staff's intent to ensure that bylaws are read on 2 separate occasions where possible. But in circumstances where an informational report has been provided to council, we're thinking that this is just an option to streamline the process and to relieve any administrative burden on both staff and council. I mean, this is something that's time consuming. It can lead to a use of corporate resources at the council floor, and really, we're again, as I said, we're finding that this is more commonplace in reviewing the procedure bylaws of other municipalities where they're not obligated to suspend procedures before proceeding with 3 readings. I'm happy to answer any questions about this item.
Councillor Barber and then Councillor Charlton.
Thank you, Worship. I'm back again, at least for a few moments. I fully support the curtailing of the separate meetings for the 3 readings. Do it all in one session. If there's any concerns or issues that raise during the reading, you can certainly defer the 3rd reading to the next meeting. It just makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Charlton.
Through your worship, you talk about using corporate resources for this procedural, suspending procedural bylaw. Is there a lot of dollars and cents with that, or is it just a time thing? Just take another minute to read a couple of sentences at a meeting, or what?
Yeah, certainly. Through you, Madam Chair, and to Councillor Charlton, I think that when I speak of creating efficiencies and relieving administrative burdens. Really, I think that what we're aiming for is ensuring that corporate resources, so staff time, are being used in an optimally efficient and effective manner. And on this type of item, I think that when you look at it on a per meeting basis, looking for a resolution to suspend procedure, perhaps doesn't seem like a very large or very significant action on a one item per meeting basis. But when you look at meetings on the year, these types of actions do add up. And I think what we're finding, Councillor Charlton, is that if there's an opportunity to create an efficiency by streamlining a process that seems to be happening on a weekly basis, really it's up to staff to ensure that we're making those recommendations to council, or at least drawing attention to them. So that's really sort of some of the background for this recommendation.
And just to briefly jump in and add to what Josh is saying, you can imagine if somebody has a bylaw that's coming before council for approval and it's going through the 3 readings process, then they're waiting an extra 2 or 3 weeks for that approval. So that can mean a lot to developers or other people who need or want something done quickly.
And I'm going to make a comment as well. Through my experience, actually, most communities, they don't even do what we do anymore. It's almost, and it's an antiquated process. So I've had a conversation with Councillor Barber about this as well. At County Council, we just go right ahead and do the 3 readings. There's none of this, what we do, like suspending procedures or anything like that. And I've actually talked to other people about this other than our staff. And very few communities even do it like we do. So it's just, I think what our staff are trying to say is it's just a more streamlined, efficient, quick way to get things through. Now, on the other hand, I will say that, and I've said this to Councillor Barber as well, there's the odd time that it's beneficial to do the 3 readings. So take your time, do your 2 readings, and then come back and do the 3rd reading. So, I mean, it's certainly up to council, but I'm just sharing what information I have found out over the last few years. Councillor Charlton?
So if there's a bylaw that we want to create, we'll have a draft of it at a council meeting to consider it and maybe make some changes or suggestions. And then it will be brought back at the next council meeting as a bylaw that we vote on. So we're going to be exposed to it twice rather than just once for 3 readings.
Josh, did you want to answer that, please?
So, certainly, through your worship, and to Councillor Charlton. So I think in this scenario, it's perhaps a good example where an informational report has been brought to council with all of the suggested amendments. So council right now is deliberating on 3 suggested amendments to the procedure bylaw. So in some circumstances, staff may have prepared a procedure bylaw amendment. So rather than looking at an informational report in front of you right now, you'd be looking at a bylaw, and we'd be reviewing the redlined version of the bylaw to consider those changes. So in that scenario where it's the first time that council and the public, for that matter, has received notice of these suggested amendments, it wouldn't be appropriate likely for council to provide 3 readings in that scenario, given that it is the first time that they've seen it. What staff have suggested in one of the examples here, just as some background for this recommendation, is that this is becoming our common practice at the town, where when we do have substantive bylaw amendments, we find that it's more efficient to sort of garner council input and have this discussion sort of at the report level rather than at the bylaw level. So in this scenario right here, what we're doing is receiving council input to help guide the preparation of a bylaw. And then at that point, where the efficiency comes in is that rather than the staff, drafting the bylaw without any council input at all, and then having to look back at it again and rework it and finalize the 3rd and final reading, staff will be able to prepare the bylaw from the outset with the council input that's been received at the informational report stage. And it just leads to a more efficient process. That way we can have more open discussions about council preferences and ensure that the final product, the bylaw that is being presented to council, is reflective of those discussions that took place at the informational report stage. And that said, again, Councillor Charlton, I think that with this, we're understanding that a lot of bylaws are different. There's certainly circumstances where, first and second reading and third reading being on separate occasions is absolutely mandatory. There's even some circumstances in the notice policy where, council is obligated to give notice of a bylaw amendment prior to considering the bylaw, and the procedure bylaw is an example of that. What we're recommending is in circumstances where there have been informational reports or circumstances where there have already been a public meeting that implicate that bylaw, that council consider offering themselves the opportunity to read it 3 times, sort of at their discretion, and when it's when it is in the public interest to do so, whether it's to speed the application process along, to best accommodate a vendor, etc.
Councillor Charles, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so when you talk about staff drafting this stuff up, what staff are involved? Are there different staff members involved for different types of bylaws, or when you talk about staff, who are we actually talking about?
Certainly. Through your worship, if I may, and to Councillor Charlton, it really depends on the nature of the bylaw. You'll recall, and I guess you'll see we've got a bylaw on the agenda this evening for third and final reading for the road occupancy bylaw. That was a bylaw that implicated myself and the deputy clerk, the director of operations, sort of all the business units that are impacted by the bylaw. Whereas there would be other bylaws that are more sort of general housekeeping nature that would be managed, solely by myself and the deputy clerk. So it really varies depending on the bylaw itself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments just about this particular part of the report? Okay, seeing none, Josh, did you want to carry on then, please?
Certainly. So the third recommendation associated with this report has to do with the format and sort of the dissemination of the consent agenda. The recommendation has to do with seeing that the clerk circulates a bi-weekly information package to council by email that would include all of the publicly available municipal association communications and general circulation municipal notices. So our expectation is that many of the items that we're seeing regularly on the consent agenda, so items such as correspondence from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario or correspondence from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, fairly routine items, be circulated to council in advance of the meeting, and also posted on the town website and for public review. And really what that does is it provides council members with an advance notice, first off, of the items that staff are circulating, and members of council or the public for that matter would be able to speak on any item from these external parties in advance, which would allow additional time for staff to undertake research in advance of the meeting. This evening, for instance, we've got 20 items on the consent agenda. Some of them are fairly substantial reports, and at the same time as well, some of the municipal resolutions and notices of resolutions have already been received at the council table. Council's already seen that for information. So what staff are suggesting is that by having this circulation in advance of the meeting, we would be able to ensure that the consent items that end up on the public council agenda and that are deliberated on in the public meeting are of value in the sense that council would like to speak to them, and that perhaps they're not available elsewhere publicly as well. And I mean, I apologize, this is sort of the theme of the report this evening, but there is a major efficiency to be found there in that any item, any document that is in the care and control of the municipality and posted publicly, so every item on a council agenda is subject to AODA accessibility requirements. So we've got staff, which is typically the deputy clerk in this scenario, who are going through and remediating each document to ensure that they can be, I guess at the highest level, read by a screen reader. And often correspondence that's received from external parties is not accessible, which leads to OWN spending between 5 and 15 minutes per document remediating it so that we can post it on the public agenda. So that's one item to consider. It's anticipated that this package would be published on the Friday night following a council meeting, which would ultimately allow council and staff at least 5 days to request an item be added to the subsequent agenda. And also, I should note that throughout this process, all municipal resolutions and association correspondence directly addressed to the town of Elmer would be automatically included on the consent agenda. So if we were to receive correspondence from the County of Elgin or an Elgin County municipality that has listed, Elmer as a receiving municipality on the notice of resolution, those would automatically be on the agenda. I think the resolutions that we're really looking to sort of offer some discretion to council to have more to do with the sort of where one municipality will pass a resolution and circulate all Ontario municipalities. And then you have a series of other municipalities that are endorsing that resolution and also copying all Ontario municipalities. And it leads to, many items on the consent agendas that, again, the deputy clerk is working towards remediating. And also that it often isn't new information for council. This is sort of recycled resolutions that, could be potentially don't need to be on the agenda. And
Okay,
happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Are there any questions? Councillor Oslach.
Yes, Your Worship. So Josh, as I understand it, the consent agenda would come out Friday night. Would it be weekly or bi-weekly?
Through your worship and to Councillor Osage, so it would be bi-weekly. It would correspond with the council schedule, and so again, so as staff compile all of the lists of all of the correspondence that's received that we would normally just put on a consent agenda, that would be received and circulated. Obviously, any items that are directly addressed to the town would automatically be included on the agenda, whereas some of the more discretionary items that are publicly available, so items such as AMO correspondence, AMCTO, Federation of Canadian Municipalities correspondence, members of council would be able to highlight which ones of those items that they'd like to speak to in advance of the meeting. And that way staff are prepared to be working with council and ensuring that the information on the public record is as accurate as possible.
Further, would come out on Friday night, so we could go over the consent agenda, and if we were required to speak on something, we would get a hold of the deputy clerk and put
certainly
it on
through
and put it on the action item, as I understand. Yes.
Through your worship, it would be as a consent agenda item then on the regular consent agenda. If there was a request for an action item, though, that would also be an option and a good opportunity to flag that in advance of the meeting. Yes.
Thank you, Josh.
Councillor Chapman.
And what would be the cutoff date for that? Sorry, for you, Your Worship. What would be the cutoff date for that request that it be put on the agenda?
Through your worship and to Councillor Chapman, I believe that a logical cutoff date for that would be sometime midday on the Wednesday. As council's aware, staff do publish the agenda on Thursday at noon. So obviously, if there was something that came in last minute, we would most likely be able to accommodate it. But as a general practice, if I think that if council and staff had 5 days from the date of publishing, which would bring us to the Wednesday, we would likely be able to solicit some high quality feedback throughout the preparation of the consent agenda.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments? I think the thing I'm gathering from this is the fact that we just need to be transparent and make sure that everyone can get access to the material. And if it's going to be on our website, that means that the public have an opportunity to look at that material. And like has been suggested, there'd be time if they had questions, they could certainly get a hold of someone and get their questions answered. And if it was something they wanted on the agenda, they could. And that's just, I'm speaking for the public, but then again, for council as well, if we find something that we want answers to, we could certainly get that on the agenda by the next meeting. So I'm okay with this one, but I mean, that's just my opinion. Has anyone else got any comments about this? Deputy Mayor Andrews.
Through you, Your Worship, just very quickly, I think anywhere we can find efficiencies, we need to act on them. And, you know, time is money. You know, there's times when our staff have lots to do, and while it's their job, we need to find ways to make their jobs more efficient, and then they can focus on other things that are more important. So this makes complete sense to me. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Andrews. Councillor Oslach.
Yes, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Andrews, because I think publishing the consent agenda that Friday gives us really a chance to look at it. And along with the meetings Wednesday night, it gives us a longer time frame to look at not only the agenda, but also the consent agenda. And if we want to bring something forward, we can. I'm in favor of it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Any further questions or comments? Josh, how do you want to proceed then with all the information that we've discussed today?
Through your worship and two members of council, as we had discussed before, there may be an option, just given some of the technical difficulties, to defer the resolution to a future meeting of council. That said, it also does appear that all members are back on the meeting right now. So really, it's the prerogative of council as to how they wish to dispose of this resolution.
Okay, so I'm going to turn that over to council. And do you want to defer this and have the opportunity to think about it more, and we come back at a future date and actually vote on it? Or is everyone prepared to vote on it tonight? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. This is a significant change. My suggestion is to defer for now.
Okay, Councillor Barber, we can't hear you very well, but we did get that you're asking it to be deferred, and so that's very clear. Anyone else have any comments? Councillor Chapman?
Is there an option to defer the first part about when our meeting is? And if the rest of council are willing to vote on the other two segments?
Well, again, I'll turn that over to Josh. Which way would you like to approach this, Josh? What do you believe would be the best way to approach this?
Through your worship, I think that just in the discussion that's taken place, and that some members are struggling to contribute this evening, the virtual meeting, I think that it might be preferable to keep this report sort of as one package. At this point, that would be a recommendation. I'm not sure that we would see a huge impact on the second and third item immediately, that we wouldn't realize with just considering it on August 9th, 2021.
Okay, so just so everyone's clear, then we're going to be deferring this particular report. Is there anything else we need to do, Josh? Because after all, we do have a motion on the floor.
Through your worship and two members of council, with the permission of the mover and seconder, I could reread the resolution. Alternatively, council would vote on the main motion as presented, and then somebody could move another motion to defer.
Okay, let's go that route.
So I'll just have to refer to the deputy clerk on that, unless you remember, your worship, just who the mover and seconder on that motion were.
I don't remember, sorry.
Okay, perhaps Owen can chime in.
Yes, the mover was Deputy Mayor Andrews and the seconder was Councillor Oslach.
Thank you, Owen.
Great. And so Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Oslach are content with me rereading the resolution to recommend deferring the report, Clerk 2921, to the August 9th, 2021 regular meeting of council.
Yes.
As this is moved by Deputy Mayor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Oslach, that report, Clerk 2921 entitled Procedure Bylaw Amendment be received for information, and that council defers the report Clerk 2921 to the August 9th, 2021 regular meeting of council.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Are there any further questions or comments? Everyone understands this? Okay, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And thank you, Josh. The next report is CAO 3221.
That CAO 3221 respecting the Town of Elmer Community Improvement Plan be received as and that council support in principle and increased focus upon the downtown community improvement facade improvement program as outlined in this report.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Ham. And I will turn this over to Andy if you'd like to give a bit more information about this report, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is really about thinking creatively to try to support our downtown businesses as they recover from the pandemic. Here we're looking to simplify the application and approval process for the Community Improvement Plan's Facade Improvement Program. This is a program where businesses in the downtown CIP area can apply for 50% of the funding for things like signs, windows, brickwork, paint to make their businesses more attractive. Staff really want to encourage businesses to participate in this funding opportunity. The Council Initiatives Reserve provides some flexibility to go beyond the budgeted dollars for items that Council feels are worthwhile. So whether it's this grant program or someone wanting to develop a new festival or event, town staff really want to assist and would look forward to bringing any options forward to Council for consideration. And with that, I'll try to answer any of your questions.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions for Andy? Councillor Chapman?
For you, Your Worship. Did I read correctly that there's $5,000 in this fund? And $5,000 isn't a very large amount if you're trying to change the facade. Is there more funds available? Because if one business owner did $10,000 worth of work, they could take the whole $5,000 in one shot. Or is there a time span for the applications and the money is divided according to the number of applicants?
Through you, Mayor French, that's a great question. So essentially what looks like happened is in 2012, this program was created, which had a number of different potential community improvement areas. There was the fairgrounds, there was downtown, and there was out by the Elgin Innovation Center. There was 3 different ones. And the uptake in the first couple years for any program seems to be so low that the budget got set far too low for it. So for all of those programs annually, we have $5,000 a year. Now, certainly, we don't want that to limit the businesses that file applications because there is a Council Initiatives Reserve. So staff would rather bring reports forward to Council and not have the money, or to look at other funding sources to try to do something special for the community this year. Just this specific year. And then next year, we'll try to right size the budget for this to say, this is how much we should be setting aside for economic development. And it's important to notice that there has been a lot of applications through the Elgin Incentives program, but that's an Elgin County program. That's not necessarily ours. So it's about having our own Town of Elmer's CIP plan go into effect.
Councillor Chapman, go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship. So can they double dip? Can they do the Elgin Incentive and the Elmer, or would it be one or the other?
That's another great question. I think staff would like to present double dip applications to Council and let Council be the arbiter in that, because I don't want to eliminate any of the great businesses that we have in downtown from trying to get as much funding as they potentially can get for these projects.
Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Oslach.
Yeah, Your Worship, to Andy, the county has a similar program. Now, basically, if the business in downtown Elmer would apply to the county, could they double dip into Elmer or not?
It's through you, Mayor French. So there's nothing in our the town CIP program that would prevent it. So we'd have to make sure that they aren't getting paid more than they put into the project. I think would be the big caveat is if somebody applied and they got $2,000 from the county and the project was a $7,000 project, they'd still only be applicable for that half of that $7,000 from us, and they couldn't make more money than what they actually put into developing it. So, but there isn't anything within our policy or process that doesn't prevent it.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? The one thing I wanted to mention is that I'm in favor of this 100% because anything we can do to help our downtown businesses, especially since COVID, I think it's wonderful. But the key thing to this whole thing is the streamlined application. It's going to make it less onerous on our business owners to be able to, get those filled out and get some money to help with their work that they need to get done on their property. So I think this is a great report. So thank you, Andy. With no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is report CAO 3321.
That report CAO 3321 respecting comment period potential Elgin County development charges be received as information, and that council recommend that the development charges be amended to establish a larger apportionment of county cost for the Elmer Library expansion.
Okay, thank you. Someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Charlton. So again, Andy, I'll turn this over to you and maybe you can explain it a bit further for us, please.
Thank you, Mayor French. So this report is to allow us to make a comment upon the Elgin County development charges. I know in the consent agenda, council has already seen the comments from West Elgin, which were not supportive of it. So I just, if you missed that one, I'd highlight that. What we're suggesting is that we try to use it for an advocacy tool to advocate for more funding towards the capital investment by the county into the library redevelopment. Certainly a lot of these aspects around the library redevelopment are ones that I have discussed with Julie, the CAO of Elgin County. She actually mentioned to me a lot of these options were ones that she came as a speaker when the town was considering it before and talked to a committee and suggested a lot of these options. So I do think that there would be some willingness by the county to look at them. It's just in terms of when I began here and my discussions with her began, I think it predates, like the DC work was already well underway at that time. So it hasn't been included into their DC to consider giving us a bit of preferential treatment for the library. And again, the options will be all dependent upon whether the library does go ahead. And that's one thing that with our budget consultation that is going out now in our survey, we're going to get a bit more information for council to see if the community does want that project to proceed. So that is kind of that, but there's all sorts of different details in terms of DCs within this. And certainly there is a wide breadth of whether or not they would be very beneficial for Elmer. In Elmer, we do have our own DCs and they work very well here, but a county level DC would see us paying into supporting development in other communities just because we're so small geographically. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. To Andy, you just mentioned, or you just answered part of my question, and that there would be an outflow of cash. If development charges are implemented in the county, can a municipality opt out, or is it applicable to the whole county, whether or not the municipality supports it?
Through your worship, that's a great question. No, there is no opt-out ability. As soon as the upper tier puts it in place, we have to do it. And the requirement is to, we have to also provide that portion of funds by, I believe, the 23rd of the subsequent month. So it even dictates how we recover and send the money up to the county. So it's a very detailed piece of legislation.
Just a follow-up, if I may, would you anticipate that it would actually be an outflow of cash? We wouldn't recover the investment that the developers have made in Elmer if there is a Elgin development charge? We're not going to get back what they put out?
That's another good question. So the argument that you will be told is that the people of Elmer will benefit from the development in other areas of the county. So if there's an additional road lane or something put in central Elgin, we will have some of our residents who occasionally use that roadway, or maybe they commute up there, and they will benefit from the proximity to it. But in terms of the county actually planning to develop more capital projects in Elmer, the main one that you would see is roads, and we don't have the capacity for them to build more roads. And the other impact of the development charges will be that it can only be to fund new growth. So even if they do start raising funds to go towards roads, it's only going to be a portion of that capital project. So you could expect to see that if we're expanding new roads or the county's building new roads, that's not an austerity approach. And having a non-austerity approach, we'll see our county levy go up. So even though there's a portion that's covered by the DC charges, we could also see our county rates, which are quite high, probably 10 to 15%, 20% higher than most county tax levies in the area, at least. And you could expect that to go up in the long term. So it is a different approach, and but it is something that is decided at the county level, and whatever happens, we'll make the best with it and advocate for Elmer as best we can.
Thank you.
Okay, first is Councillor Oslach and then Councillor Chapman.
Yes, your worship, to Andy, we've been trying to build a library in this town for 15 years. And I don't think we're going to build it for the next 15 years. So I think we give the county a lot of money already through our taxes. And I'm not in favor of giving them more money through development charges. And I don't think, I've lived with the library in the last 11 years, and it's been frustrating, and it's taken 15 years, and I don't see the town getting together over the next 15 years to build a library. So I'm really against the county developing charges. I think we send enough money to the county.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Councillor Chapman?
Through your worship, first of all, I disagree. I hope that we have a library before the 15 years are up, but we won't go there today. This development charge for the county, we have our own development charges. So would this be an additional charge to the developers?
Yeah.
So, and what is the rate of this charge that they're looking for?
That's a good question. I think it's all dependent upon the type of development, and the challenge with development charges is that it's based on the per meter, so it's calculated per project. So it's always hard to tell how much of an additional impact it would have. We'd have to see it run for a year or two, but they can only levy development charges for services that they provide. So it's things like POA, ambulance, long-term care, very libraries. So they can't develop it for things like water or wastewater. So it makes sense for Elmer to have it because there's a huge benefit to DCs when you have your water and wastewater infrastructure. But for the county, it's a bit more of a challenging prospect because really, if they have new roads, it's not in our interest to have the county build new roads. It's actually in our interest to have county decommissioning bridges and things like that, because that's the true austerity approach.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments? Well, I'm going to speak to this because I said at county council, I'm not in favor of this because that's a double development charge for our developers here in Aylmer. I agree with Andy that there's not a whole lot that they can do with development charges at the county. They're a whole different ballgame than the town of Aylmer. And I don't like the fact that all the municipalities have to collect the money on behalf of the county. Our staff will have to do the work. It will take time, and there are cutoff dates that it has to be submitted by, which puts our staff under stress having to collect all this extra money. And I don't want anything to deter our developers in Aylmer. They've had enough hurdles to jump through. So in my opinion, I'm not in favor of development charges. And this is the second time this topic has come up at county council since I've sat on county council. So that's just my opinion. So are there any further questions or comments about this? And is everybody clear about what this whole report's about? Because it's quite in-depth, really. There's a lot to know about it. Councillor Barber?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to mention that I fully support your opinion. We don't need a second development charge in the town of Aylmer.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. So looking at the resolution, I think there's a specific statement in there about the library, if I'm not mistaken. Josh, did you want to bring that up? Okay, so to be honest with you, and our council needs to understand too that we're not talking big bucks here. So if in fact we did specifically state that we want help through the development charges for the Aylmer expansion, we're not talking about significant amounts of money. I could be wrong, but it's not that much, would it be, Andy?
It's through you, Mayor French. So currently in the DC study, the only amounts that they have at the Elgin County for the library are related to Elmer. So there is no DC charges for libraries without Elmer doing something. Well, maybe there is in terms of advanced circulation, but what they have in there is 135,000 in terms of capital costs for this project, and then they have in the next years they have it's over a $3 million contribution for increased circulation. So if we don't expand the library, they don't get that 135, and they are also that 3 million must shrink down. I don't know if it's $1 million, but they don't need as much circulation because their major argument for circulation is the expanded library.
Right.
So there is an impact on them if our council says we don't want to go ahead with the library, and that's why it is. But council may desire just to support the resolution of West Elgin from what I'm hearing tonight.
That was my point, because our resolution does look significantly different than West Elgin's, but to be honest with you, I like West Elgin's resolution. That's just my opinion. But what do the rest of council think before we vote? I know this is on the floor and we've got a mover and seconder, but we've just got to be careful because there is specific wording in this resolution about the Aylmer Library expansion. Do you want to support this particular resolution, or do you prefer a different type of resolution such as West Elgin's? Councillor Oslach?
I prefer a similar resolution to West Elgin myself.
And so do I. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor Andrews?
Goodness, sorry. Yeah, I would support, again, Councillor Oslach and yourself, Mayor French, on adopting something similar to West Elgin's.
Okay, thank you. And any further comments from council? So Josh, I guess we'll leave the magic to you again, since we've come up with a bit of a, oh, sorry, Councillor Oslach, did you have something else to add?
No, I waving my hand around, Mayor French.
Okay,
Sorry.
I just
Sorry.
thought you had something further to add. Okay, thank you. So Josh, if you wouldn't mind, I know we've got this particular resolution on the floor, but if you can direct us through this to maybe modify it or whatever.
Certainly, through your worship, I'm not able to see the entire resolution in front of me just because of the meeting live stream right now, but I will say there's, council has several options here. One of them may be to endorse that resolution that was sent through by West Elgin. Council could consider receiving the informational report for information and then endorsing the Municipality of West Elgin resolution dated June 24th, 2021. Alternatively, council could direct staff to prepare a similar correspondence for your final signature and submission.
Okay, I'm pretty good with their resolution, but there may be the odd thing that might have to be tweaked a bit, Josh. So maybe if we can go with what you just suggested, that you go through it and look at all the different statements in this particular resolution, and then just tweak it so that it's more towards what Aylmer is looking for.
Certainly, through your worship, that would be acceptable. And then in this scenario as well, we'll want to follow up with the mover and seconder on that motion, just to ensure that that we're changing the direction with their permission, or alternatively resolving the motion that's on the floor and suggesting an amendment afterwards.
Okay, so I guess we'll have to reach out to the mover and seconder to see what they think.
Through your worship, could the deputy clerk please provide the mover and seconder on the motion?
The mover was Councillor Chapman and the seconder was Councillor Ham.
All right, so do the mover and seconder agree with the suggested direction as set out by the chair?
Councillor Chapman, you agree? And Councillor Ham? Yes, they both agree.
Okay. And through your worship, would you like staff to just send this correspondence to the County of Elgin, or should staff copy Elgin County municipalities on the resolution as well?
I think it should be copied to all the municipalities, please.
All right, so the resolution on the floor then was that report CAO 3321 respecting comment period, potential Elgin County development charges be received for information, and that council directs staff to produce a resolution for submission to the County of Elgin and Elgin municipalities, similar in nature to the Municipality of West Elgin resolution dated June 24th, 2021.
Okay, thank you, Josh. So any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is CAO 3421.
Right. That report CAO 3421 respecting award of RFP Realty Services be received as information, and that council award the RFP for Realty Services to CBRE Limited of London, Ontario for an initial listing period of 120 days with the potential for an extension of 120 days, and delegate authority to the CAO to sign the required Ontario Real Estate Association agreements in accordance with council direction, and that council provide direction in closed session upon listing prices for the following properties: White Street New Industrial Lands, Leslie Street properties for 3 lots, Beach Street East / Progress Drive property in the White Street, roll number 3411 0303518, and that council evaluate the proposals for 59 Talbot Street East and 6771 Talbot Street East in closed session prior to making a decision upon including them in the RFP award, and further that council directs staff to further negotiate with CBRE Limited of London, Ontario, respecting available parcels of land around the proposed highway bypass at Progress Drive and present a proposal at a future council meeting.
Okay, thank you, Josh. And I have one question before I ask for a mover and a seconder. The report is CAO 3521, but in the actual resolution, it's stated as CAO 3421. So can we have clarification on that?
Through your worship, I do apologize. That's an administrative error on my end.
So it in fact is 3421?
It should be 35, your worship.
35, okay, just so we have clarification on that. Thank you very much. Someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Charlton. So I'll turn this over to you, Andy, and maybe you can give us a bit more information about this report, please.
Thank you, Worship. And firstly, I got to apologize to Josh. I made an error in the report number there, and I also gave him a full page of resolution to read out. I love hearing your voice, Josh. So this report is to award for RFP and realty services to CBRE London. Sorry in advance, as staff did circulate all of the deemed complete RFP submissions under confidential cover. In hindsight, it would have probably been simpler just for me to provide a chart summarizing the projected sale values for each property, for each proponent. In the future, I will try to proceed with summaries because I know the target size of our agenda should always be under 200 pages. So I don't want to overwhelm any of the council members with too much information. So my apologies for that. That being said, council has received all the RFP submissions, so they are aware of the quality of the proposal by CBRE and why it did score the highest points. If council decides to proceed to award, the approach would be to delegate authority to myself to enter into an Ontario Real Estate Association agreements for an initial 120-day listing period. That would take us until November, at which time council will again review the properties and decide whether to list for another 120 days. Council will need to go into closed session later tonight and provide direction on target sale prices, and also to consider whether to proceed with one of the 3 informal proposals on 59 and 67 to 71 Talbot Street East, or to award them as part of this RFP. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, are there any questions or comments for Andy? Councillor Barber. I think you're on mute, Councillor Barber.
Copy that. It's confusing turning off the camera, turning on the camera, and doing the microphone. The joys of electronics. Anyway, scoring of the points is one thing. What really drew you to CBRE having the best proposal, if I can put it that way?
So that's a great question. CBRE really did their homework. You could tell that they have both the market knowledge for this area. They are out of London. They do have the market knowledge, but they also went and they looked at the official plan and other documents and really identified issues that nobody else really caught in the proposal. So the amount of due diligence and attention to detail that they put into it, and of course the marketing plan specifically for the new industrial properties really was impressive. So I think council and the community will get great value from having them provide this service.
As a follow-up, what I liked about their presentation was that they were the only company that had a picture of downtown Aylmer and very professionally put their presentation to print. It was a nice job. Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And the next report up is CAO 3621.
That report CAO 3621 respecting 85 Forest Street condominium update be received for information, and that by 2/3 majority vote, council amend resolution number 17021 of June 7th, 2021 meeting as follows: that paragraph 2 and 4 be deleted in their entirety and replaced with the following therein. 2, that council grant approval for 85 Forest Street subject to the owner developer entering into a development agreement with the town. And 4, that council delegate authority to the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services to determine the final conditions, requirements, and content of the development agreement upon 85 Forest and to sign on behalf of the corporation when fulfilled. And further, that council proceeds with 3 readings of the bylaw 4221 to repeal and replace bylaw 3621.
Thank you. Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Charlton. Did you have anything further to add to this, Andy?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just very briefly, the report is to assist in allowing the development of 85 Forest to occur as quickly as possible. Previously, staff utilized the approach from when the town last went through the condo development process, but the county's indicated that's not required. So, but they, along with the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority, have placed a limitation on the property that will require the removal of 1 unit. The developer seems satisfied with that, but he wants to get underway as quickly as possible, and this will facilitate that.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, Andy. Are there any questions or comments about this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. New business and matters of urgency. Okay, seeing none. The next item is reading of bylaws and proceedings thereon, 3rd and final reading.
That council gives 3rd and final reading to bylaw 3921, being a bylaw to regulate the activity on municipal right-of-ways and public lands.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Barber. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is to suspend procedural policies.
That council suspends the procedural policies to proceed with 3 readings of bylaw 4121, being a bylaw to declare certain land surplus owned by the town of Elmer. Bylaw 4221, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a development agreement between Fari Holdings and SAB Development and the corporation of the town of Elmer for the development of lands located at 85 Forest Street in the town of Elmer. Bylaw 4321, being a bylaw to amend the bylaw 5799, being the zoning bylaw for the town of Elmer relating to 33 South Street East. And finally, bylaw 4421, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a development agreement between John and Julie Hotkey and the corporation of the town of Elmer for the development of lands located at 33 South Street East in the town of Elmer.
Okay, thank you. Someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Ham. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. And the next item up is 3 readings.
That council approves and gives 3 readings to bylaw 4121, being a bylaw to declare certain land surplus owned by the town of Elmer. Bylaw 4221, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a development agreement between Fari Holdings and SAB Development and the corporation of the town of Elmer for the development of lands located at 85 Forest Street in the town of Elmer. Bylaw 4321, being a bylaw to amend the bylaw 5799, being the zoning bylaw for the town of Elmer relating to 33 South Street East, and bylaw 4421, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a development agreement between John and Julie Hotkey and the corporation of the town of Elmer for the development of lands located at 33 South Street East in the town of Elmer.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is inquiries by members. Okay, seeing none. Statements and committee reports. There are none. There is no report of the mayor this evening. I don't believe there's any notice of motion. So our next item up is meeting closed to the public. So for the resolution, please.
That council moves into a meeting closed to the public at 7:12 p.m. to discuss the following matters. Chief Administrative Officer Report CAO 3721, being the companion report of the award of RFP for realty services. Chief Administrative Officer Report 3821, relating to property-related matters. And Chief Administrative Officer Report 3421, relating to a proposed restructuring. And these items are pursuant to Section 239 2C, D, B, and F as amended, as the subject matter pertains to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations or employee negotiations, and finally, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
Okay, thank you. Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. And we'll just take a couple minutes to move into closed session. Thank you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.